50,000
chickens
used to live here. Now it's a ghost town.
The rules have changed. There's a fine line between right and wrong. And somewhere in the shadows, they send us in to find it.
You're gonna die for some chickens.
someone is.
Welcome back to Robinson Actual. Tonight we're going to be talking about some homestead defense. And what put this on my mind was the fact that tonight I just saved this little guy from a fox here on the little homestead. You know, with homesteading being so popular these days, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there looking for solutions. That little guinea just shat on me, shat on my Jesus flag, and messed up my video all at once. So anyway, homestead defense when it comes to defending these little boogers. Do you really need a set of dual L3 Harris White Foss filmless 2400 FOM M1 Pano bridge on a G24 Wilcox mount on a Hycom ballistic helmet to get the job done? No. I'll show you a few of the more affordable ways that I utilize to keep my homestead safe. And some people might think it's a little bit overkill, and if you're a hobby farmer, maybe so. But the reality is, if you're homesteading in order to just be able to survive without Walmart being open, in case of a natural disaster or something that is longer term, being able to harvest your own food and raise your own meat, that's just priceless. And once you get into it and you realize not everyone is ready to sell off some chickens at any given moment, any time of year. So while you can replace your critters now at the local farmer's market every weekend, it might not always be that easy. So how do we keep our homestead and our resources safe from predators and people that didn't prep as good as you? One way that I'm a huge fan of are these Amazon driveway lights. These things are ridiculously handy. They're solar charged, so they just sit in the sun all day charging. And then you've got the home base, which is just this little pod that plugs into a Type-C charger. And it's got 1, 2, 3, and 4. When these things go off, depending on which one you've got it set to, so you can connect 4 of these to one hub. And each one has its own ringtone. And so I've got like 8 of these just on the perimeter. And I've got the hub in my room, and when the ringtone goes off, it's at the point where my dog knows which direction I'm heading, either front door, back door, and once we get outside, he knows if we're going chicken coop or towards the horses field. A 4-pack of these things is like $150 on Amazon, and it's worth every penny. Another piece of hardware I like to use are these little Amazon trail cameras, is kind of how they're advertised, but they're solar powered, and they connect right to your phone. You only need a subscription if you want playback features. This thing, just for it going off on my phone, if I'm in the bathroom or in my office late at night, I can get a notification on my phone of movement anywhere on the property with these things. My company also uses them on job sites all the time, so I've got different ones labeled for different jobs. And I can just check on the job site, gets notifications if there's any movement. It's IR assisted night vision surveillance. So those things are cheap. They're like $50-$60 a piece, and you can put them all over. And just being alerted at which direction the intruder is coming from is a huge plus. So that's the hardware I utilize to get an idea of where the threat is coming from. I also have living alarms on this little homestead, and other homesteaders will know what I'm talking about. When you've got a flock of guineas and a donkey on your property, guaranteed nothing is going to be intruding without one of them hollering about it. That is a big ass spider. I'm kidding. I stepped on him. So once you figure out where the threat is coming from, now you've got to get a sight picture, you got to be able to see them, and 9 times out of 10, they're coming in the middle of the night. Now, we all know night vision solutions are expensive, but starving to death because all of your chickens got picked off by a fox one by one in the middle of an economic collapse, that's more expensive. So let's invest in ourselves and our equipment so we can efficiently protect our homestead. And this stuff is going to be absolute bottom tier of a more advanced kind of shooting. So thermal, night vision, stuff like that. If you're going to be utilizing it in combat, get nice stuff like the L3 Harris tubes and stuff. If you're just protecting your homestead, that's where this kind of stuff really plays a part. First up, we've got the AGM Rattler TS256. This is a thermal optic that you can mount on your rifle, but most of the time I'm just using it to pan across my property and look for hot spots. It'll pick up a rabbit bedded down in tall grass. It's pretty impressive. So I really like this thing. Keep it on my nightstand. I can pan across my property with it. And if you live in like a more suburban neighborhood kind of setting and you hear a weird noise or maybe a car door, you can look outside with this thing and look at your neighbor's cars and see if someone just pulled up because their engine will still be hot, you know, their rotors will be hot. It's pretty cool looking at a vehicle through a thermal. But you can verify, oh, that was, you know, the neighbor just pulled in, just got home late from work or something. Or you can see, oh, every neighbor's car is cold. There shouldn't be a vehicle, someone getting in and out of a vehicle around here at this time. Up next, we've got the Sitemark Wraith. Now, this is probably the only product you'll see me owning from Sitemark, honestly, but it's a digital night vision device that you mount on a rifle. And it's great for longer range than if you're inside 100 or 200 yards on your homestead from your house, you know, you don't really need a dedicated night vision optic on the rifle. Have a dedicated rifle for that. And, you know, then you got 3 rifles to grab from. You know, I don't like being set up that way. I use it offhand because I can scan across the whole property without putting a lid on or anything. You can also mount it to the rifle and sight it in and use it like a scope. But this thing comes with a super bright infrared floodlight, and I really like the floodlight. I use the floodlight for all kinds of other stuff, but the optic itself, it's a lot more affordable than some of these other options, and it's going to give you a good sight picture, a good refresh rate, and it's enough to obviously varmint hunt, and it's enough to watch over your homestead with. So that brings us to my personal favorite setup, and that right here is the Sionyx Opsin monocular digital night vision device. I've got it set up with a Surefire HL1IR on the helmet, and this is just a hardhead veterans bump helmet with some walkers I spray painted. Now, the advantages of the Sionyx Opsin is that it's full color digital night vision. And it's really cool how the technology works. I wouldn't use it in a combat situation, but it does have 90 hertz refresh rate, and that's really good. They've gotten a lot better on their price point since I've had this one. I've had this one a couple years, and I think you can get them now for like $1,600 or $1,700. But they're lighter than a PVS 14. You can record, take pictures. It's got like a 12-point compass, heads-up display, tells your coordinates, all kinds of little features. But the main advantage to having full-color night vision, especially when you're watching over your homestead, is that when something like a fox comes around and you're viewing the fox through some L3 Harris tubes, everything looks the same. It's all different shades of, you know, white or green. So a bush blowing in the wind looks exactly the same as a fox's tail in some tall grass. So you can't really tell the difference. But if I'm wearing this Sionyx Opsin and I'm looking out into the field, that fox is a giant orange glowing ball. So it definitely helps when it comes to identifying threats in the middle of the dark, in tall grass, in the middle of our garden. We've got like 3,000 square feet of garden space, and those things just like to maneuver all through the rows of corn and stuff. But when I'm looking at them through this, I can just see them bright orange going all through. And even if they're brown, if it's a stray dog or a coyote, I can see brown against green a lot better than I can see dark gray or dark green against light green or light gray, if that makes sense. So now that we've figured out what direction the threat's coming from and we've got a visual on the threat, what do we shoot it with? Well, this is a very debatable topic. Me personally, I use my firearms for both home defense and homestead defense. I'm going to be prepared for either a fox or a home intruder. And when one of those perimeter alarms go off, I don't know which one it could be. So I want to be set up to handle either situation. That's why I don't mount digital night vision onto my rifles or thermals or anything like that. I've caught a body on this homestead with all three of the guns on this wall right here in their exact configuration. This is my first choice. It's just an 11.5-inch silencer co-build with a BCM barrel and rail. It's got a Verse 36 suppressor on the end and a Surefire Scout Mini Pro with 96,000 candelas and an Aimpoint Comp M5S. This little AR can handle anything that I could possibly need an AR for in my life. Up next, we've just got a Geisley Super Duty with an LPVO and a piggybacked RMR. This RMR is just a little micro red dot that sits right on top of the optic, so I can just look right above the optic and be able to use a red dot for what red dots are for. Now, this isn't the best optic by any means, but it is one of the best rifles. I took out a fox from my kitchen window with this setup before he could even get inside the chicken coop. And then lastly, we've got a Kalashnikov KP9. Now, the reason I've got a body on this one is because I was playing with it one night and had my suppressor on it and everything. And while I was in my office, the alarm goes off. So I just ran out there with this and ended up catching a possum going through my chicken coop, and I absolutely clapped him from across the field. So took them out. Obviously, I'm not an advocate for these 510C hollow sun optics, but you know, for a pistol caliber carbine, they're not bad. And if you're just plinking steel with it like I usually do, you know, the optic's just fine. But you know, you can absolutely defend your homestead with this thing. However, I don't want this to be what I grab instead of all my other gear in case there's a home intruder. So this isn't my first choice, but I absolutely took out a possum with it one night. So there's that. Now, obviously, we could talk for hours and hours and hours about homestead and home defense. But hopefully this will just kind of give you an idea of some hardware you can utilize to make you more efficient, more aware. And all this stuff's been working really well for me for about the last 5 years. So I'd say it's definitely worth investing a couple $100 in some Amazon perimeter alarms. Another cool feature is when the IR sensor goes off on these things, it looks like a spotlight under night vision. So if you're on one side of the property and whatever you're chasing goes to the other side, you'll see it light up like a spotlight on the other side of the yard, and you can kind of chase them down. Couple things I wanted to add that I didn't think about until I was editing the video. Those driveway sensors are going to go off on anything as small as a squirrel. So nothing's too small to get past it. Now, those solar powered cameras, they need to detect a vehicle or a human body in order to set it off. But that's a great way to differentiate between a home intruder and a varmint. If your phone's going off, it's probably not a fox, you know. And then another thing is all of the security cameras that you add to your house, when you're inside your house and they're pointing away from your house, they're all acting as infrared floodlights. So if you've got nods and you look outside, it'll look like daylight because all your cameras are lighting up everything. And then you can see the perimeter alarm flashing if something walks by it from your windows. So it's just an invisible lighting system across your whole property that nobody can see except the guy with nods. But hopefully some of you guys found this useful. I appreciate you tuning in. We'll see you next time.